Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Site Reliability Engineering Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP. We bring real world practitioners, share real world insights on the ground about site reliability engineering. Today, I'm joined by a good friend and esteemed guest, Raj, who is the Director of Reliability Engineering at Macy. Thanks, Raj, for joining us today. Give us a little bit of background about your journey and what prompted you to become a site reliability engineer.
Thanks, Suresh. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast and sharing my experience. My journey is interesting. I spent majority of my career as a product engineer. I started as a software engineer, architect, and almost like 20 years of my career was in product engineering. And back in 2020, I got exposed to SRE.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because when I was looking at SRE, it was not just about operations. It's about solving the problem, not just for the customers, but also for the internal employees as well as your team, right? Because SRE brings in a lot of different things. You talk about toil when we actually talk about production issues. You always have to kind of like make sure that you're building something to avoid toil. So all those things led me to site reliability engineering. And for the last 6 years, I've been spending my time in this space, and it's an exciting journey altogether.
Excellent. So, Raj, tell us a little bit about, let's kickstart on the journey because a very important aspect is about site reliability engineering in a retail industry. The level of complexity that happens, the number of transactions that happens with respect to POS terminal to delivery to logistics, this entire supply chain is a very interesting part. And so I can understand the excitement and also the level of work that is needed to pull this off. So let's kickstart to understand reliability. Is reliability like a cost center? Like people talk about, okay, we need to look at reliability from a cost perspective. But what is your take on reliability? Is it a cost center or a revenue enabler? How do you play that out?
That's an excellent question, Suresh. So majority of the place, I mean, I've been in this space for almost like 6, 7 years, and even in my past experience leading the product engineering, it has always been that SRE or ops is always a cost center. I mean,
Hmm.
you are basically buying an insurance to protect you from any kind of like catastrophic failures, right? Uh, but for me, it's not just about the insurance part. You also actually look at investing in terms of like I would say not just insurance, but also in some kind of like investment, right? I mean,
Right.
basically, all the effort that you're putting in here is actually going to compound and help you out, right?
Correct.
So when for me, it's not just about the cost; it's also about how it's going to pay dividend in the long run.
And I think it's a good point that you mentioned because when you look at a cost conversation to a revenue conversation, your kind of cost is like very short-sighted in terms of looking at today. But when you talk about revenue, is how much revenue can you get by accelerating the overall performance? Because more people are able to consume, number of transactions increases, and you're able to grow the revenue. So I think there is a shift in the mindset that site reliability engineers will have to inculcate because it all starts from the vision of why do you do SRE at the first place? Because once you understand the why, the how
Mhm.
becomes a lot more easier to apply. And that comes to that point of application. You have a numerous application, could be legacy, be it in cloud natives. So what's the, how do you look at performance in terms of conversion, right? And we always talk about orders. There are a lot of people who could come to a Amazon site, look at all the products, but who actually makes the purchase, the number of orders made. So how do you see this performance related to a site conversion part?
Excellent question, Suresh. So I always like to kind of like give an example of you going to a store
Hmm.
uh, and meeting the associate,
Hmm.
and let's assume the associate takes like few minutes to kind of like respond back to you.
Hmm.
He lost, right?
Correct.
So for us also, when you actually talk about digital systems, you always have to look at the core web vitals, which is
Hmm.
very critical for the site performance. That's the term that was coined by Google back in 2020, and they heavily measure every company in terms of how they respond, right? So even like for your page ranking, that's critical. For the conversion, that's critical. So there are three different core vitals, right, that we kind of like look at. One is LCP. So I give you an example. You go to a store associate and you kind of like wait there. You don't get a response back. So think of LCP as that, right? When you go to a page, if the page takes long time to load, then you're kind of like lost. You basically are bouncing out of the website,
Correct.
right? So we always have to make sure that it's less than 2.5 seconds.
Hmm.
Within that, if you don't, then it's going to impact your overall site performance. The
Right.
other key attribute is your INP.
Hmm.
So let's say you're clicking on the checkout button and checkout button doesn't take a load, or you're not able to kind of like go to the checkout page. That's another area where you're basically having an abundant cart,
Hmm.
right? These are key vitals that we measure, which will help us overall conversion. So I think it is Google as well as Amazon who says that every 1 second improvement on your site will lead to millions in conversion.
Correct, correct. And you have been a product engineer and you have now started to look at reliability. You saw the relationship between some of those parameters that you're anyway doing, which you did not call it as site reliability engineering coming back here. So, how do you look at reliability improving engineering productivity? Because that's one of the key metrics people are talking about with AI driven systems. People are trying to focus on improving productivity, reducing toil, improving automation. So, have you seen that happen in real world? That reliability is improving the productivity of engineers across the entire group and systems.
Of course. So look, Suresh, every second or every minute that you spend on a production call, it's a waste of productivity, right?
Correct.
Your velocity is not just gauged on how many story points you're burning,
Correct.
but you're also kind of like looking at how much time you're spending on the production issues. So we always have to kind of like make sure the systems are resilient to help us develop more features and then provide those features back to the customers.
Yeah. And I think as you go towards the productivity part, one of the areas that I think is been a lot more valuable when we have seen SRE in part of it is that understanding the whole customer journey map, right? Because there are some points, and you can even apply lean principles, look at value stream mapping and say, where is the bottleneck? Where are opportunities that we can accelerate the level of faster, flow metrics? And that's probably looking at, can we do better at every touch point of your customer interface? Because at the end of the day, every touch point is going to relate to our customer experience. So whether we call it as service level objectives or we call it as XLA, which we call it as experience level agreement, which is more of sentiment analysis, there has to be a level of understanding how do we move from left to right faster. So there's enough amount of merit towards improving productivity and an automation part of it. Now coming to that, when we talk about your own digital systems, which is pretty complex in a distributed environment, how do you build resilience into the digital systems? What are things that we need to keep in mind when we start to build resilience in digital systems?
Excellent question, Suresh. So resiliency is very critical. I mean, imagine you are in a flight and one of the engine goes down. You don't feel that, right? The pilot is going to take care of it. He has a SOP to kind of like manage that, and he's going to make it seamless so that the passengers don't know what's going to happen, right? It's the same thing for us. So when you talk about digital systems, we'll have to make sure that the customer doesn't really feel the blip. So anytime there is any kind of like a fire access error or any system that has downstream system that has an impact, we always have to make sure that your systems are resilient for those failures and still serve the customers. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, let's assume Google retail search has an issue, um, and they're not able to kind of like now search for a specific product on your site. You don't want that to be felt by the customer. So you'll always have to kind of like come up with some kind of like a cached page that you can serve the customers during
Hmm.
those incidents. So we kind of like implemented a solution using Harper, which is an Akamai product, which can kind of like take the customers to a cache page whenever there's an outage or when it's a fire exit error from a different downstream systems.
Hmm. No, I think this is great. I mean, one of the things is about if you look at reliability, I think it's gone much beyond, including some of those bot attacks that I'm seeing. So is that a big problem in the retail industry where there's a lot of bots getting attacked? Is that something that we can protect to ensure that things can be better?
Every day we are challenged with bot attacks. With the agentic now, you have newer bot challenges coming onto the site. So we recently worked with Akamai. We kind of like onboarded a product called Content Protector. Akamai has multiple flavors. They have something called as Bot Manager Standard, Premier, and Content Protector. Bot Manager Standard is more of a rule-based solution, but the Premier is based on the AI-based algorithm, which will basically identify the customer patterns and score them. And based on the risk score, you kind of like identify whether it's human or bot.
Hmm.
So we implemented that solution to kind of like route those traffic to either block or kind of like route it to Harper so that we don't get those traffic onto the origin. So imagine, I mean, all these millions of traffic coming to your origin is also actually incurring cost on your infrastructure.
Awesome. Right now, in terms of if I look at retail, I call this as omni-channel, right? I mean, you look at every touch point, that there could be different ways a consumer is consuming your products and services. So, how do you bring in that omni-channel resilience where every touch point, every interface of customer is managed with respect to that level of reliability and resilience?
It's very, very, very interesting in the distributed environment, right, Suresh? Imagine you're on Amazon, you have a Prime membership, you buy something, and you expect those product to be delivered in 2 days. It's not just about ordering the product. You're also looking at the inventory. You're looking at working with third-party providers to kind of like deliver those items to you, right? So when we talk about omnichannel, we have to work with the inventory management systems, warehouse management systems to kind of like make sure that the order that we have placed on the site has been, I mean, able to kind of like reach the customer on time. So we have different things on the omnichannel phase. I mean, we have buy online, ship to store, buy online, pick up at the store, at the curbside delivery. All those things, we kind of like have interdependencies between the digital systems. So when something goes wrong, we know exactly what is happening, and then we have enough time to kind of like react to those.
So, what are some of the failure modes that you have seen in these sections, right? Whether it is buy online, pick up in store, or buy online, ship to store. What are some of those failure modes that you have seen, and what kind of address? Does the tool solve everything, or is that still a requirement of an engineer to play that contextual knowledge and experience to troubleshoot this better?
Yeah, I mean, the tools won't solve everything. You definitely need the systems mindset, the people to kind of like who understands the end to end to kind of like come in and weigh in the different situations. We've had different situations like when the payment service goes down, we have something called as order to batch where we can kind of like still take the orders, but not real time. We will push it to batch and then we'll take those orders. So inventory is lost. So in those situations, we will have to cancel those orders, right? So there are different flavors. I mean, one is that like when the payment goes down, or you have multiple customers buying something. So previously we used to have something called as real-time inventory. We kind of like order those things. There were situations where you would let the customer hold the item for some time until he actually clicks on the checkout.
Hmm.
So you would not, and the availability of those products would not be real time because now you're waiting for the customer to kind of like either go ahead and purchase or abandon the cart, situations like that, right? So we always have to constantly figure out like what's going on. So it's interesting.
No, that's true. It's complicated because you cannot just be contented with what you are doing today, but there are so many nuances that changes every now and then. Just being on top of it is always a challenge and an important aspect why we read SREs at the first place, right?
And again, another example that came to my mind. Let's assume there's a pricing issue on the site. Those pricing issues are not caught by your systems because those are real-time pricing updates that happens on the site. You might be double dipping on certain promotions. You might be kind of like discounting some products deeply. So all those things, I mean, are important for someone to kind of like figure out like what happened and then take necessary action. So in case where you actually like now double discounting the product, you'll have to go back and cancel those orders, right?
Right.
Because these orders you cannot really fulfill. So it's interesting. Yep.
And it's also that it means your reputation is at stake because I would say that X company actually gave this one, Macy's actually gave me the deal and suddenly it canceled it. It could be a, a big social outbreak in terms of, oh, this was not done well. So there is a reputation loss. There is a
Yep. It's a
also,
brand reputation and all those things that comes into picture too. So you'll have to
correct.
take it. Yeah.
Correct. So my final question is, everything said and done, there's a lot of challenges in the production, right? Systems do break, right? I always believe in Murphy's Law, Raj, that whatever you think will go wrong will definitely go wrong, right? So as an SRE, when you look at an environment of this retail, the level of magnitude, the number of transactions, and the level of impact it could create for customers today, and everybody wants instant gratification immediately. How do you, what are some of those challenges that you see in production where systems really break, and how do we handle that in real time?
Well, in the retail space, there are several touch points, right? For a customer journey, I mean, as I said, there might be an issue with the promotion, there might be issue with pricing, there might be issue with the availability, there might be issue with the latency. So all those things we have like different touch points we need to kind of like constantly look at to make sure that we provide seamless experience to the customers. So we have several different tools, but even with some of those tools, like I mean, I was talking about real user monitoring, where you actually look at those key core web vitals. You look at the actual customer sessions in certain situations to figure out like what exactly happened in this customer journey, to figure out how do we kind of like identify those things well ahead of time to be more proactive, right? We have all those different APM tools like Dynatrace, Datadog, which can also provide you real-time telemetry. But we need to be able to kind of like tie these things together to understand like where the actual issue is and then see how we can kind of like mitigate these things from happening well ahead of time.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very important part to it because I call this as like blind spots, right? Because if you look at really the way of your handling that you're doing it, there's a lot of things that is going behind the scenes, right? How do we make that really workable? Because not everything is spotted out by your APM devices. Because if you don't have that full coverage, you still have that gaps, right? You get blind spots that we probably need to be sorted out to do that. The other aspect is also about the Black Friday part, right? Like typical use case for us has always been on a Black Friday number of transaction. How can we even handle that, right? Sometimes it can go beyond a threshold, and from a pattern of business activity or demand management, there's a lot more in place. So particularly on your Black Friday sale and discount sessions, how do you ensure your systems are reliable? Is there any specific aspects that you consider in mind to make sure that you don't have customers leaving the site and ensuring all the orders get fulfilled, make the maximum money and profitability?
So, see, Black Friday and Cyber Monday is like a Super Bowl for all the retailers, right? We always have to make sure that the systems are up 100% of the time.
Right.
So, every year, I mean, before we get to the Black Friday or Cyber Monday, we go through multiple iterations of performance testing.
Hmm.
We go through chaos testing to kind of like figure out like what are the breakage points that we need to kind of look at. We kind of like look at the application capacity. Like, okay, if we have to kind of like support the 2x load, do we have enough infrastructure to kind of like do that?
Hmm.
So we had to kind of like identify all those different points of failure and make sure that we have a plan in place to address those things. So we have all the run books that we kind of like execute before holidays and then take necessary action. A couple of things I would like to call out like that we had to do recently is one is HPA enablement because you want to make sure that your pods can scale up or down when the traffic pattern changes, right? So we work with Google to kind of like do that, enable HPA. which will help us kind of like scale up and down during situations like that when we have events like Pokemon on the side where you have sudden surge of traffic. We also kind of like looked at all those different applications like that we integrate with, like I talked about order management, I talked about warehouse management. We did end-to-end testing to kind of like figure out like if there are situations where there might be a breakpoint downstream which might impact the site. So all those things we had to kind of like make sure that we do well ahead of time before we get to this real big day like Black Friday or Cyber Monday. So we always scale up the capacity during that time, and then we have all those resiliency things that we have incorporated into the systems that would always help us. Like, I mean, if a payment goes down, we have a way to kind of like take those orders in batch. If there are issues with downstreams, we have circuit breakers to kind of like address those resiliency points. We have resiliency with Harper in case of situations with any of those third parties going down. So things like that we have kind of like put in place. Hopefully, like, I mean, these things will shield us, but there are always new situations that come up, and we'll always have to kind of like work towards that.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I think you covered pretty much in terms of your preparation. I always still one of the important part in SRE is about anticipation. Because what you have realized is that you have tried to look at breakpoints, you have mitigation measures. So you have like think that okay, if this happens, we will be able to manage. But then there comes to a point that something out of the blue starts to come, and that's where the real test, what I call as the acid test, happens, right? So, in your cases, has there been an instance, in spite of all your run books, making sure that these are the possible suspects that could come on such a kind of an environment? Something out of the blue happens. How have you handled that, and how has been that pressure in terms of, it could be a major incident, it could be an outage, it could be a part, but how has that prepared you, and what would you suggest as a practitioner when such kind of situation happens where you have zero clue, with all said and done, with all this stuff, something breaks, and it takes a little bit of time, right? We need to have think tank time to do this whole analysis, and there's a lot of pressure coming up from calls and business from to do that. So how do you manage that from an expectation standpoint?
Yeah, there has been situations like that in the past where something happens I mean, even though you're prepared for worst case scenarios, you always kind of like get into situations like where a third party goes down, or there might be something that impacts your site, and you have to kind of like take necessary action to kind of like mitigate or remediate from those issues and then bring your site up, right? One thing I always tell the team is to just focus on the issue that is on your hand. Don't kind of like get distracted, because when situations like that come up, you always have like 10 people on top of your head looking at what's going on, and then you have to kind of like respond back to those people or the leadership, right? So always heads down on those situations. Look at different angle, not just look at your application, but think about all the different touch points that you have that might impact your site. You might see a symptom in one case, but that might not be actual root cause. The root cause might be somewhere else, right? So that is what I tell my team. We try to kind of like mimic these patterns as part of the kiosk testing, but you never know, right? There
Yeah.
are situations that come up all the time.
Awesome. So thanks, Raj, for giving us a great insights about site reliability engineering in the retail industry. Some of those core vitals that you talked about, the ability to handle things, moving from cost center to a revenue opportunity that you're trying to see that. It's also about bringing that omni-channel experience. And I like the way that you talked about ways to look at mitigation of certain problems that you know for sure, and constantly learn, constantly making that effort to build your system knowledge, which we call a system thinking. Because at the end of the day, the tools can give you some insights, but it doesn't give you the contextual knowledge that we have. And hopefully that will help each one of us as an SRE to make it really impactful. So it's been a great session so far. I'm sure that our viewers would enjoy that nuggets of wisdom and also start applying some of those things to be done. So final question would be, Is there a role for SRE in the future with all AI coming in picture? What is your prediction with such kind of with we are in disrupted world? How do you see that end goal?
Yeah, it's interesting how agentic is coming in and playing a role, and I'm seeing a lot of shift in the operation space too. In fact, I've been actually like looking at or building something in house to solve some of these problems for us, right? I mean, we can leverage agentic to also identify the pain points or the issues that could arise in production environment. So one thing that we're trying to do is integrate with different APM solutions, different log monitoring solutions, and then apply agentic using Gemini LLM to identify where the root cause might be. Even though you don't have a SOP in hand, the agentic solution will actually kind of like figure out, like based on your knowledge graph, what might be the issue and how we can kind of like mitigate those things. So definitely, it's going to be a combination of human and agents, right? It's not going to be just the agents taking over. I definitely think that as SREs, we'll have to kind of like evolve with the technology and incorporate this new technology and new tool set into your daily life to be more productive.
Awesome. That's great and very insightful. Thanks again, Raj, for taking time today and sharing your perspectives and the world and showing us the world of SRE in a retail. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suresh. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
So, viewers, you enjoyed this episode of SRE Practitioner series. Please make sure that you subscribe to our channel and also click on the bell icon so that you get notified about our new podcast on SRE and other episodes. So, I hope you will get some inspiration with what Raj shared today and make sure that SREs are able to make an impact to both your organizations and as well as building reliability across the world. Thank you so much.